extended budget, the actual line items. What is that, 50-something pages? Is that available up there? Okay, there's some copies of that available. But the copies that most people are interested in are the cost centers and the subsidy comparison reports. Those are usually the ones that I go on at this point of the budget process. And at the bottom left-hand corner, the date on the subsidy comparison report that we will be discussing this evening is May 4th, 2017. And the same thing with the cost centers. The date is May 4th, 2017. So I'd like to start this evening. This particular budget that we're presenting this evening does include all of the programs and services that we currently have at the Lisbon School Department. And this budget is built on the preliminary ED 279 figures that we received on February 16, 2017. And what an ED 279 is, it's actually the form that we receive from the Department of Ed each year that outlines our subsidy, and it outlines also the essential programs and services, the EPS formula that's currently being proposed. And there have been several changes to the essential programs and service model based on the current budget that's been proposed by the governor. And as a result, there are some changes to our numbers that I'll hopefully cover this evening. The recommendations in this budget, we have an overall budget increase of 2.68%, or $409,967. The total budget, including adult education, is $15,735,507. The total local funding amount, including adult education, is $6,529,996, which would result in a $535,913 increase in the local taxes. And I did discuss earlier what that would be as far as the mill rate, but again, until we get additional numbers, or I think it's better to, I normally try to calculate that, what that would be an impact, but again, until we have the actual numbers, we can't go there, or I don't have those figures, but it's roughly, what was it, 500,000 or something is roughly 1 mil. But again, I don't have those, I don't have the actual numbers of what that would relate to. This evening's presentation, I'm going to explain to the community, like I have in the past, what the total budget is and how that's calculated, the contributing factors to this year's budget. One of the sheets that you picked up this evening in the back is the report that we received from our Director of Student Services, which it outlines our special education numbers and those changes over the next year. Be talking about the state contribution, the total local funding, the budget history. I have a 10-year graph, or 10-year chart that I show our budget history, which includes state subsidy, local contribution in the budget. There's no particular bond proceeds built into this budget. As you know, the track and the gym were both, all the proceeds were used from those, but there are funds that are in our current budget this year that we're not expending that came from that, so I just want to point that out. That's going to be rolled into our unassigned account next year. Capital Reserve Fund is another fund that we use to develop budgets, and the unassigned fund balance amount is the amount that we also use to build our budgets each year, and we did increase that amount, but that's a result of a couple of other factors that I'll explain. And then any variables that we have that are left or remaining, however, there's a couple, but for the most part, it looks like prior to this budget going to referendum in June, it's unlikely that we'll have accurate or actual numbers from the state. And I just want to point out that a lot of school systems, you may have seen in the papers, a lot of school systems added additional language to their referendum questions, asking for permission to utilize any existing or new funds that they receive from the state. I didn't put, well, one, our ballots were already in, I think they were already being submitted to be printed, but I didn't want to make things complicated and when people go in to vote to see a new question. And then some of the some of the ways the questions were written I thought was pretty confusing, and if you were a taxpayer and you went in and you saw that there was a line that said that you were authorizing the school to expend any additional funds in any manner they seem appropriate, I wasn't quite sure that that would be a good sell. So what we would say, or what I'm telling the community, is that if we do receive additional funds between now and next year, those funds would be rolled into the next year's budget, and hopefully this conversation would be a little bit easier if we do have additional funds come our way. The total budget on your subsidy comparison report is the combination of the state and local contributions. The total amount of this proposed budget, which does include adult education, as I mentioned before, the state contribution this year is $8,492,994, which is a 1.7% or $146,063 decrease from last year. One of the things I noticed when I was doing the spreadsheet is that our state subsidy has decreased by over $500,000 just in the last couple of years. Some of that's was the result of our enrollments, but a lot of that is the amount of money that is being transferred over to the school department sides in regard to Maine State Retirement. Maine PERS is the term that you'll hear. I think that's almost $400,000. The local contribution in this budget would be $6,529,996, which is a 9% increase, or $535,913 increase from last year. So again, the total budget is $15,735,507, which is again a 2.7% increase from last year. So what are the major contributing factors? When you look at this particular budget, in any of the presentations I've made so far, the major contributing factor is the Gartley Street School, our day treatment program. Last year we put that together in the last minute, trying to agree on a budget, and we knew that it was something that was needed. We had a lot of students. I think at the time we were spending, or we were budgeting $200,000 or $300,000 in out-of-district costs for our students. So we put this program together, and we were able to. We initially built it for 10. If you look at the sheet that I handed out from the Director of Student Services, I believe they're up to 21 students. We have 10 new students, or I think there's a report on there. There's 5 or 6 new students that are going to be admitted next spring who are as young as kindergarten. And one of the things you have to realize, and what I'm telling everybody, I understand it's the driving force behind the increases in this budget, but one way or the other, the community that these children live in is responsible for paying for their education. So it's either we can spend anywhere between $40,000 and $90,000 per student to be placed outside the district, or we can create this program and have the opportunity to save funds, because roughly, without even adding transportation costs, even though the program, I think this is budgeted for over $800,000 for next year, that's probably $100,000 to $200,000 less than what you'd pay if the kids were out of district. And that doesn't count any of the new students, doesn't count transportation, and and the revenue piece is kind of a wild card. We overestimated the revenue when we first developed the program. I think we budgeted, or thought it'd be like $139,000, but with MaineCare and the billing process, it's been very complicated. We're getting much better at it. We just received a notification today that we're going to be receiving some funds that we'll be able to bill that were prior to today. So we're hoping that the revenue numbers, I think we budgeted $79,000 for next year. We're hoping that will be on the low side, not on the high side. So we're hoping that will help offset, or at least help run the program. Now, originally we did have an out-of-district student who was attending our program, and that was helping with costs, but they eventually moved to here. And so now they're living in Lisbon, so now we don't get that revenue. But we have been contacted by several schools who are interested in possibly sending more students, and I think that if we were to take in 3 or 4 students the conversation, at least with revenue, would be much different because I'd be able to tell you that we're generating a significant amount of revenue because you're talking anywhere between $200 to $300 a day per student is what that cost is. So special education costs, our numbers are going to be increasing by almost 50 students to over 260, I believe, that's on that form. That's what we're estimated at. And of course, those numbers fluctuate. We have students that move in and students that move out all the time. But again, that's the biggest driving force in this budget is those costs associated with that. And of course, salaries and benefits, 70-something% of our, over 70% of our budget, salaries and benefits. Those are all, we are currently, all of our agreements, local and collective, are all, have already been negotiated. Our next round of negotiations doesn't occur till next year. And then, of course, I already mentioned the Maine State Retirement. That was an increase this year of an additional $66,489, which brings that total over the last 3 years to $359,052, which normally is now being paid by property taxes. We used to receive that money, or that used to be paid by the state. Under our revenue, we did have a decrease in our revenue. That was obviously $60,000 was because of we overestimated what the Gartley Street School was going to bring in. And of course, the bonds, we used 80-something thousand dollars in the bond proceeds to pay the interest on the 2 bonds over the last couple of years. And our state subsidy overall between the school and the adult education, we lost $146,063 in state subsidy. When you look at your subsidy comparison report, the state contribution, again, I mentioned how much the state pays, the $8,477,994, what we receive in state subsidy currently. And then I also mentioned the essential programs and services, which looks at your teachers, your guidance, librarians, health, ed techs, library techs, and clerical. This year, the current particular budget does not have any type of system, any money put in there for system administration. That's what you'll see on the news and what the governor's proposing. So that's currently not included in the essential programs and services model. The amount that we're above EPS is $1,377,013. That's related to athletics, co-curricular, teacher retirement, substitute pay, and nutrition, which is all money that has to be raised that's outside of that model. The transition amount that we talk about each year is the difference of the 55% funding that's required by law. So because we don't receive the 55%, we have, there's a transition amount that we have to build into our budget, and that amount that you have to raise locally is an additional $277,470 for next year. The number that most people are concerned with is the amount of money that you have to raise locally, and that is basically the amount that we have to that's required to raise locally through taxes. Again, this budget is this year we'd be proposing that there would have to raise $6,529,996 locally. The budget history, as I mentioned earlier, you'll notice, as if anything, the years probably 2015, 16. I think we were receiving almost $900,000, I think, more dollars in state subsidy. But when we had increased state subsidy, the local share and the total budget, the local share went down, the total budget, even though it went up. However, it's been, as you can see, the trend is that we're receiving less state subsidy. We're almost receiving the same amount that we received back in 2011, 2010, 2011, and 2011, 2012. Our numbers, our student population, although they declined a little, they haven't declined significantly. I think we're right around, I think last time we were 1,290 students. The Capital Reserve Fund was established in 2012. This fund was intended for the maintenance of the plant and minor remodeling. As of today, The balance in this particular account right now is $92,299. This budget, school budget proposal, we built in the use of $39,768 from the Capital Reserve Fund, which we've historically used over the last several years to help offset guaranteed performance contract costs, and that's the same with this year as well. The unassigned amount, or unassigned balance, used to be called the undesignated. I think our auditors 2 years ago, the term was changed, so it's unassigned fund balance is the term that they use. So anytime when you hear our audit reports, that's what they're referring to. And each year we use unassigned funds. These funds are accumulated when we close out our budgets and they do the audit. Any funds that are remaining, whether it's from the school or unanticipated revenue or any type of revenue that we receive, that money gets rolled into our unassigned balance, and then we can utilize those funds to help offset our school budgets. Over the last few years, we've put in more money than we've taken out. The balance currently, even with taking out the funds for this year, would be around a little over $600-something thousand in our unassigned balance. The auditor said that we should keep at least close to $300,000 in there to operate. So this year, based on the circumstances, we utilize an additional $150,000 in this particular budget to help offset taxes, more than what we used in the past. The other piece that's part of this is that we budgeted for the bonds, the track, and the gym, and not exactly sure what happened, but there was $50-something thousand from the, it was, let's see, correct. Just trying to think of the amount. And there was 50-something. It was basically the payment, and so we had already budgeted for it, and then the payment the payment was made after, or there was one more payment left in the bond proceeds. So anyway, the auditors notified us that we had those funds. So that money, although it's in our budget for this year, it's going to be put into the unassigned account for next year, and then that'll be it for the bond proceeds. So even though we don't have a slide for bond proceeds, there's actually, I just want to be upfront with everyone that we do have, there was $50-something thousand in a payment that we received for this year's bond proceeds, but we'd already budgeted for it. So then that will be rolled over into next year, and then that's the 150 plus that equals, I think it had to have been $59,451 because we did 150 additional. So those funds will be utilized next year to help offset taxes. And we should be able to, hopefully, what I'm hoping for is that the revenues from the Gartley Street School will increase over the next couple of years. Most people say it takes 2 to 3 years for a program like that to get on their feet and to get the billing straightened out. And we're looking at possibly changing a vendor who does the billing, and also the people that we have all been trained, so they're doing much more work with the billing piece. But hopefully over the next couple of years, that'll be able to bring in additional revenue, and you still have, depending on how much we turn over this year, there's still enough funds in there for at least another year so that you could use that $150,000 additional of the unassigned account to build your budgets over the next couple of years. The variables, our adult education program, we're still waiting for approval from the state on how that will look. We're also waiting for approval for our pre-K program, although I don't see any issues with the pre-K program. They did change, you do have to submit a new application to get your pre-K program approved. And we haven't received word yet, but we're hoping that will be approved. It's been in existence for several years. But again, those are two variables that we need to still get final approval from the DOE. The latest variable has been the MPA recently voted on co-op agreements and how that percentage will impact schools. Historically, I know our hockey team has been in a co-op agreement with Topsom and Winthrop, Morse, sorry. And so what they used to do is they used to take the total enrollment of each school that was part of a co-op, and they would base the teams on that. So our hockey players have been playing in a high Class A division, whereas now they will take the percentage of the kids of the schools and calculate it, so you can have these co-ops, and these 3 schools will probably play in a low B or high B or a low A versus high A next year. And so that's important because we have certain teams that we have low numbers in, and we will be able to look at other schools. We've been approached by RSU 4 in regard to possibly combining a couple of our teams that we have low numbers, they have low numbers. So there's some savings there. I just don't know how much, and I think over the long term, I think some of our smaller programs will be able to benefit, or at least the kids will be able to benefit by being able to play in other towns. The capital reserve is available. We could utilize additional funds for that, but it seems to be that using the capital reserve in the budget, it's been preferred to use it for the guarantee or for the performance contract. The Gartley Street School is a variable because the revenue that can be generated, but also the savings that we could get from bringing in more students. Resignations, anytime we have resignations, we always look at restructuring different positions, and we continue to do that. The state budget, until that's passed, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime before we go to referendum, but you never know if that is passed and we receive additional subsidy, then that could be a plus or a negative. Hopefully, if it's a plus, then those funds would obviously be put up front next year to start off next year's budget, or the following year's budget. Unanticipated revenue. Sometimes we do receive funds. We just received a check from our, was it workers' comp, or what's that? Or unemployment. We just received a $3,000 check for that from MSMA yesterday. So you never know what you're going to get for revenue. Any of those revenues will be put into the budget for next year. And the unassigned amount and fund balance, which I think I feel pretty safe with saying that you could probably build a budget by adding $150,000 for the next couple of years. But you also have to remember that when that fund balance gets to a certain amount, you don't want to go any lower, so you have to either make cuts or raise taxes to cover that amount. But I think we're good for at least the next 2 budgets. So again, overall, the budget numbers that I've already presented, ultimately, this particular budget would raise the local taxes by $535,913 in local taxes. And once we know what the mill rate will be and what, or not what the mill rate, but what the amount will be, then we can share that. I'm not sure we'll have that before our referendum. Okay. A lot of numbers, but I'd like to open it up now for questions for members of the council or community.
Up here, any questions, Mr. Green? I got nothing. I heard last night's, and I've asked several questions going into this. Can you recap where you started this process to where you ended? What was the beginning number?
1.2 million, but that wasn't, we had some calculation errors
Right.
with the software.
It was the starting point associated with that. So in that regard, somewhere around $700,000.
Yeah, I think it was, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but yeah, I think it was close to 700, 770 or 810, something like that when we originally started. But that was, again, that was when we had insurance budgeted for 9.5%, and that came in at 1.35, but then our workers' comp.
I would love to have 1.35. Thank you. Take the anomalies.
They get us for 8 point something last
Yes,
year, so
exactly.
I think it's just, I think they make you feel good for a year or two and then give you the big increase. But our workers' comp rate, mod rate, went up by almost doubled.
Right.
But we had quite a few settlements.
Seeing nothing, I will close the public hearing then. Thank you all.
You can. You're in a regular meeting, so you probably should.
To adjourn, I need a motion. I need a second. There you go. All in favor?
Order passed, 6-0.
Thank you all for coming out.
Yeah, she does. All right, so he stopped the microphones. Yes, she left me an envelope, so I would mail it to the right place.